Hello everyone, welcome back. Anyone had a chance to make any submissions or edits further in this competition?
I have not had any movement at all for the last week.
What do you mind?
Hi guys. I tried the notebooks here with the large GVM, the 5-fold one, the 10 splits one, which came in, I think so, 4 days ago. And it put me in the bronze medal list. And it had a 10 splits or 10-fold CV. 10-fold.
What I had gone through earlier, I imagine, right? Like the basically, is it choosing still one fold from the 10, or is it choosing two from the 10?
Sorry, we can't hear you. You are breaking a bit.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, it's better.
Okay. No, I was saying, is it 10-fold but choose one fold, or is it 10-fold choose two folds?
I think so. It's 1-fold.
Okay. I see. So it's basically just 10-way split.
Yeah, it's 11-way split in the. If I look at the configuration file,
Yeah.
the configuration
11,
class. Yeah.
Yeah, the 11th one would probably be, the kind of the best. After you've done the 10-fold, kind of pick the optimum depth and then run a fold on the entire data set, right? Which is what the 5-fold guy does as well.
Yeah. Since I'm new to this, I'm currently wrapping my head around this. So yeah, it's interesting with respect to how this can be used for light GBM. This is my first project that I'm using light GBM for. So I found this interesting, this approach interesting.
Okay. Yeah. I'm GBM.
You are breaking a bit, Srinivasan.
No, I said I've done GBM and variants of it multiple times, but I think I'm kind of stuck at pretty much this level 5.339, 3387 or whatever. And I think the only way to improve beyond this is what Steve is doing, which is, all these approaches or notebooks that are public don't do the one thing which Steven was doing and Rekel was attempting to do. I haven't yet gotten around to doing that, which I hope I'll do in the next week or so, which is to begin to incorporate the new data that gets exposed through the API. That is, as you predict each day you predict, the prior day's predictions get exposed by the API. Exposed meaning that those are now visible to you, right? So what you'll need to do is what Steve has successfully done, which is the reason I think he's in the silver medal, like 50, somewhere in the 50s, 60s rank, is basically to combine that data with your existing data and keep building that data set. So as you keep predicting each day, you get the prior day's results. So you add that, you merge that with your existing data set or tabular file, using pandas. And then after about, I don't know, because you're predicting, I think 3 months, maybe after a month, retrain your model on the new complete data set, and then use that model to predict as well. So that helps in keeping your data relatively fresh with respect to what you're trying to predict. So that's something I haven't gotten around to, but I think if you incorporate that along with
wouldn't that data be like expire with respect to, suppose if we have a week's worth of data, then the next week's data will be stale, and it won't have that same effect as the closing trading part at the end of each day. I was thinking, is it some sort of relation? Okay. Let me try to rephrase it. Yeah. Does it also have some sort of scalability to it factor? Some data.
The only thing which would be stale is you will need, as you add, let's think of it this way, right? Like, let's say we now have, and I don't know exactly how much data, by how much I mean, in the past, let's say we have 6 months of data and are predicting the following 3 months. If we, and obviously we predict day by day, right? So we predict, let's say we've used 6 months of data from the past to predict day by day, and then you're predicting for 3 months. But as you predict day by day, and after you're predicted about a month, you could, for example, in the approach that Steve has implemented, and I think Rekil is joined too, so he can talk about it as well, that you can begin to merge day by day the data with your past 6 months, and then you can always constantly choose the last 6 months. So by doing that, you would be put in your in what you said, purging the last month in the past. So if you have a 6 month window, it's like a sliding window forward day by day. And when you retrain the model after about a month, then you would have purged the last month, the very last month, and you would have incorporated the most recent month. And then you can predict going forward. So that, I think, is the better, that's the one thing I haven't done yet. And that's, I think, critical to getting a better score. Rekil, have you been able to implement that?
Yeah, so I think there are the two parts to that, right? Like, one is using yesterday's information to predict today's stock, whatever the prices are. And as you keep going in 3 months, since this competition is going to be, they're going to evaluate you, you keep getting new data. So even if you don't do like incorporating the last day data and you have a model that works, you still keep getting fresh data. So you can just retrain your model on that information. I haven't got the retraining model part, but I've got the using yesterday's data to kind of predict today's stuff that running. But I've been just running like really small trees. So I don't have any results that are like putting me up on the leaderboard. But those are the two ideas. I think Steve was saying just incorporating yesterday's data to predict today's stock prices was the one which kind of gave him the bump.
But what do you mean you could combine? It's essentially you would.
No, the two different things, right? Like using yesterday's data to incorporate today's was basically you've been given for all your stocks, you've been given whatever the closing prices are. So now in theory, if you add, let us say, to the day column 1, that will shift everything and you can train your model with this. So this is what I think Steve was talking of. And that's what the API also gives you. It gives you yesterday's full, all your 540 buckets data for the stocks. So that's like
Right,
having. Go ahead.
But that's, you're saying you add a day and then you retrain the model, right?
No, that's what I'm saying. When you say retrain, are you talking of getting new data and kind of retraining? Because this does not.
Yeah, see, that to me, I thought the two were, that's why I'm trying to still wrap my head around the difference, because my understanding of what Steve was describing is okay, as you say, you get a new day of data and you merge it with what you have, because you now have an additional column available, right?
Correct.
To so to speak.
Yes.
So you merge to create an
column.
So your data set has one more column than it did before.
Yes.
To simplify things.
Yes.
Right? And you keep going, you keep adding one more column as you predict each day.
Okay.
Right?
So that was not
right?
my understanding.
So as you predict each day, meaning, if counter, and if your counter advances, then you have one more day. So you can stick that day into your, whatever your data set or your tables, and add one more column. So you do that for
columns keep growing.
That is my, and you can obviously purge if you want. You can just choose from this expanded column a fixed window, right? Which is you merge. Again, this is my mental concept. I could be wrong. You just keep adding the additional day that you have, right, to the edge, to the end, and as you said, your data set grows. But when you retrain the model, and you're not retraining the model when you do that, and after you've added, let's say, 30 days, you say, now I want to retrain, because you don't want to retrain the model. It takes time, right? And complete cycle. So you do it once every, let's say, 30 editions.
Correct.
So because you're doing it for 3 months. So after 30 editions, and you keep a counter, and after 30 editions, you retrain the model, and you use that model to predict. That was my understanding.
Right.
Is your understanding was different, and if so, how?
So there are the two things, right? Like, I think the first one, which you said, at least the easiest way to put it was, right, you're adding an extra column, which is basically giving you like all yesterday's information. And this is where I got confused when you said you keep adding columns. I don't know if, at least my understanding was not that you keep adding columns. It's just that you offset the date by +1. You train your model. So you have now this LGB model or whatever that has seen yesterday's information as a separate new column. And that's it. Now, when you get new data in, you just predict by using that extra column, which is provided in the API, which is yesterday's data. So this one was just using the column as an extra feature. The retraining with fresh data, that's more like adding more rows. So you keep adding more rows, which is the most current data, and you keep purging the older rows just because compute time is a limitation. So that's where my difference was, but I could be wrong, because I tried adding just one extra column, which was the +1 on the date, and training and submitting, and at least my quick experiment didn't really move anything over there.
Yeah, my understanding, when you say rows, then
right,
because my understanding was, okay, you're only going, you're saying rows. That's the thing which I'm lost at. And also, you say after you get the new column, you train the model. But I was thinking that you don't do the training on every edition of the column. You add columns, and you add it, to the API. One more day gets exposed, right?
Right.
And that day's data is something that you add to the your pandas file and create. Now the question is, do you create new features? But you would only create the new features if you are again training it on the new features, right?
Right.
Because otherwise, the new features,
Yeah.
I mean, you won't be able to predict. So you
Right.
just add the column, my understanding, and that's why, you add the column, but you just keep adding. You don't do, you just predict still on whatever you had in the past. You're not using the new data. And in your case, you seem to suggest that what you could do is use the new, I mean, you don't retrain the model, but you use the new data to predict the next step. Is that I think that's the delta between what I'm saying and what you're mentioning, right? That you don't retrain the model, but you use the new data to predict the next day.
I think if the competition wasn't run for 3 months, right, for the prediction part, then you would not get this new data, right? You would just get everything in one shot and you would make your prediction.
Correct.
In that case is where I think this extra column that you're adding, which is basically bringing in yesterday's all your closing price data, that is where I think my understanding is. And that's how, if you kind of look at the API also, that counter which runs, the way I think even Steve was showing that was, what is it, like for a counter of something where he was doing like mod 55. And that's where it kind of changes onto like the next ID. So if you look at
the next date.
Correct, the next date. So that is I think that is the aspect which I was implementing. So I just have one extra column when I'm training now, which has all the, what is that called? The target price, but all the target prices have just been moved by whatever, that 11,000 rows, or you can just do a merge based on stock ID, bucket ID, and date ID, correct? So that is the thing that I think Steve was saying helped with the boost. Now, since the competition is running for 3 months on evaluation, you keep getting new data. And that is more current information. I mean, like, obviously, if you're trying to predict today's data is more relevant than what happened 3 months or 3 weeks ago. So that's where you kind of use the new data. So these are new rows, right? You're flushing out the older rows, the earliest rows, 0, 1, 2, 3, all that. And you keep appending to whatever the millionth row you have, which has come in new now. And you retrain a model with this chunk now, everything else being constant. You could obviously have that extra column here, since you've already built your model with that extra column of shifted target price. And you just kind of update the model that way. But yeah, I guess Steve's probably the right one to answer this. This was my understanding. Kind of got sidetracked last time. I was building something where I tried to peek into the model by seeing which are the stocks that it was performing the worst on. And I was consistently seeing like stock ID 31 was the one which was really performing bad. So I was just kind of trying to peek into 31 and see like, is there something weird with the data, or like what is going wrong? Yeah, but I couldn't get anything else. Yeah, from there. And the other thing I was trying was I wrote a loop which kind of generated 200 different models for each of the stocks. And yeah, so I have, so I predict on, based on the stock ID, I would select my model and then do a prediction on that. So that was breaking for some reason. So I got that running, but everything is like 10 trees or 15 trees. So nothing really stable with the results yet. So
you're saying you would eventually ensemble 200 models?
No, not ensemble, right? Because each model is for only one stock ID.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you would not ensemble, but you would use 200 models to predict your output.
Final
basically.
output. Yeah, exactly.
Final output, because
Yeah.
you're using one model per stock.
Yes. I don't know
Okay.
how
But
silly that idea is. But I was just
that's
curious.
very interesting, right? Because that is interesting, but I was just thinking the pros and cons of that approach.
Mhm.
The con I can think of is the correlate, because you are doing it, because you are eventually we are predicting bucket comparisons. As I mean, I'm using this word bucket comparison to mean that you're comparing to a weighted average of stocks anyway,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
Rather than so in that sense, the impact of the market or the weight, you're
Right.
kind of under emphasizing if you do it per stock, right? Because each
Right.
stock by itself. So, again, just thinking of the market, like one stock, and to pick on your 31, for example, let's say 31 really tanks, but, a majority of your other stocks have risen. Then that would have, again, just speculating, and we can debate it. I'm not convinced. I'm just making an argument.
Right.
That would be a poor predictor when you compare it against a weighted average, because that would be the only one that's pulling the average down, whereas everyone else is pulling the average up, for example, if the market were to go up. So if you do it that way, then you haven't somehow factored that the market, which is the bucket of all these stocks, has gone up.
Correct.
And that's a signal that you're missing when you do it by 200.
Yeah, right. Makes sense. Yeah. Naturally, yeah.
Now, I'm just thinking what would be the pro, though, of doing it by 200, right? Because I'm sure, it may have some, because I guess the pro would be if you were to actually want to predict a particular stocks, then you would be better off doing that. But we aren't actually predicting a particular stock. We are predicting against a weighted average of stocks. So is that the reason why, that may not work? I don't know. That may not work as well, is what I should say. I mean, if the goal is to predict individual stocks, then that might be a better approach, right?
Right. Probably, yeah. Makes sense. Yeah. The target price, though it is a weighted average. Not 100% sure. I mean, that's what actually I wanted to talk with Steve and see, like, since I was thinking 31 was the weird one. So I wanted to ask him, like, with what he's built, if you kind of build a separate model for like maybe these few ones which are giving you high errors, and then try to ensemble those results in, then what happens? Because I don't know, it kind of helps with those that are performing worse. Or the other thing I was thinking of is, like, if you look at the target price, it has a pretty wide spread. So that was the other thing, like maybe you can bucket them, and then instead of doing each stock, like everything in the range of, I don't know, like every fives, -5, -15 to -10, you kind of predict those stocks together. Anyway, yeah, I'm just thinking of something. Haven't got anything concrete or successful.
Yeah, and I did one thing which Steve mentioned. I didn't finish the experiment all the way through. I got, past 2 weeks weren't the most productive, but which is Steve mentioned, for example, that this odds thing that we talked about. There is some not normalization, but some
That's zero.
what is that?
Yeah.
That zero thing. Yeah,
Okay,
that zero thing wasn't implemented in the validation set, but was only being done in the
submissions.
test when we actually do the prediction. So I modified the code to shove all the validation data through it as well.
Okay.
And I haven't, so got, as I said, I didn't finish the experiment in the sense that I didn't go back and check whether because of that, whether my validation scores got any better at predicting, what my test scores would be. So that's something I have to complete. I did manage to get it to run by adding the zero into the validation approach as well.
Okay.
And by the way, while we're on that topic, the one other question that you had asked, and I wanted to, let me share my screen. It was a question you had asked that I pursued. Let me know if you can see.
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Let's just look at this one. I mean, it doesn't matter what, but you had asked a question of why 21, right?
Yeah,
There's
correct.
this sliding window. So did you figure that out?
No, I haven't.
Okay. So I had a kind of a, I don't know whether to call it a guess or what, but I was wondering whether this is the explanation. So I'd like your thoughts on that. Okay. Here. In his feature generations, right, he uses there are some sliding window in this thing, and I thought, and I could be wrong, but I have to look at what the I thought this one in another notebook had like 1, 2, 3, 5, 10.
Oh, okay.
And if that's the case, then
I see.
that addition gives 21, right? And I was wondering whether, because this is basically saying he's just shifting the windows, right? And he's shifting, in this case, it's not 21, but if you add a 5, then it becomes a 21, right? Like 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, right? So if you're shifting by 1, shifting by 2, shifting by 3, shifting by 5, shifting by 10, then you would potentially need 21 to accommodate all those shifts. So one of the things I was thinking of trying, I haven't done it yet, but is like if I were to add 14 to this, then shift by 35 because we have enough, right? Then
the 21 that is there, this is the line of code, right? It says cache.group by on stock ID, and then you're doing tail dot tail 21. So you're using like the last.
So you take the
21.
last 21.
Right. So
but by taking the last 21, then you would be generating these features now on the last 21. Is that right? Or is it on all of them anyway?
The weird thing is the notebook that I'm looking at doesn't have the shifts at all.
Which one is that? I'll stop sharing. Maybe you can share.
Sorry, unfortunately, I don't think I can share. But this is the first.
You're not in a.
That okay. Yes, the first notebook that you were sharing, the one, this Optiver robust best. Let me see if I can pull out the original notebook.
Oh, the best single model one?
Yes, exactly. That's the one.
Okay. Yeah, that one. Let me see whether I can get. Because most of the ones, the 339 ones or the 3388 ones, in fact, are the ones which use this. For example, let's look at. But if you look at this, maybe this is the one that I saw the 5 included as well.
Yeah, it has 5 included here. If you go down,
You see this?
yeah.
Yeah, you see this?
Okay.
And right. And then, oh, by the way, another thing I noticed is the day of the week is included in the other notebook, but in the traditional 5-fold CV, but the day of the month isn't. So that's
Okay.
another feature he has added, the day of the month too, by the way.
Did
There's
you
an
see
additional one that doesn't exist.
there was a new notebook which matched the date IDs to dates? So they were able to
Yeah,
get
no,
back dates. So then once you have the dates, you can kind of build out all the generic date stuff that comes with the dates. I haven't tried that yet, but I saw someone posting that.
Oh, I see. Oh, interesting. Let's see, where is the 21 now?
Okay, here is the model. I think.
21 is in the final when he does the inference, correct?
Yeah, for
Right
the
here.
inference piece.
Right. Yeah. See, this 21.
Mm-hmm.
So because the cache is just empty, and then he adds the last 21 values by stock ID, date ID, seconds in bucket, and stock stuff. And then does he use the
What does tail 21 refer to here?
that's the thing we're discussing, right? He just uses the last 21 values of the test.
Okay. So, in which sense, the test set has been only the last 21 values are being used. Am I right here?
Yeah, that's what you're trying to figure out. And this is that if counter is equal to 0, only on that condition is this tail 21 happening. So yeah, I'm still not 100% sure what is going on there.
It is so cache is empty when you get in here because I think
Correct.
I'm mistaken.
An
Yeah,
empty,
cache is actually not cache is an empty data frame.
Right.
And then you get the test data frame and you just concatenate with cache.
Correct.
So basically you just add
you get this 11,000
you're just
rows.
concatenating.
Right.
Yeah, right. And then you take the tail 21 of that. After your
Wait,
group
counter is
divided.
0. So counter is 0. So it doesn't go in the first time.
Sorry?
So counter is 0, right?
Yeah.
The first iteration, it won't go through.
Correct. But as soon as you do the next one.
Right. So that's what. So what is happening there is what I was still trying to figure out because this is where the counter module of 55 is equal to 0, which is because every time the way test and the predictions are generated, it's kind of weird, right? Because test gives
you get it at 0. Yeah,
exactly.
But modulo 55 times 200.
Right. So
correct. So you're predicting the 0th time, right? And you're not doing any of this tail 21, blah, blah, blah. You're assuming you just predict on the test. Then the next step, which is you have now exposed the prior date, right? Exposed yesterday's targets. And then you go in and you are grouping it by stock ID and then taking the tail 21 of going forward, correct? And that tail 21 would mean that you would use only the last 21.
Yeah. So that's last 21 for each stock, right?
Yes.
So last 21 for each stock.
And that's where this is what led me to thinking that the reason for the 21 is because you have these sliding windows that need to be accommodated.
Oh, I see.
And those sliding windows add up at least here to the one, whatever, that 10.5 and blah, blah, blah. That's, again, I'm not convinced of my explanation.
No,
That's why I just wanted to.
I see. Okay. So basically because, oh, sorry, can you go back to that sliding window piece of code?
Yeah, sure.
I think that makes sense now. Okay, awesome.
Yes. Now here it's 1, 2, 3, 10, but
right. So in theory, yeah.
Again, confusing. Here it's 1, 2, 3, 5, 10.
So you need a max of these two. So yeah, okay, 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 is the oldest information that you would need, which is what is he doing? The group by stock ID for each shift window.
He's creating additional columns.
Yeah. Okay.
Of each of these columns, match size shift 1, match size shift 2, match size shift 3, match size, or imbalance size shift 1, imbalance size shift 2. So he creates those columns, right? And in order to create those columns of shifting stuff, you will need the maximum of whatever you are shifting,
right?
Or else it will all be nans. And that's why I was thinking that when you do the tail 21, then you will need tail, if I were to add a 14 here next, right, then I would need a tail 35. And I was going to try that to see whether that helps improve my score too.
Right. I'm just trying to see. Okay. Yeah. So at inference, okay, you need the maximum, and you need to go back a maximum of 21 to get all the information for your features. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Okay, awesome. Yeah.
Right. So I was just, again, I'm not 100% sure, but it's a guess based on what I'm seeing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes sense now. Yep.
Because you'd asked the question and I
Yeah.
question. So I wanted to try that and then get to implementing what you and Steve got working yet. But because I think that's the big difference, that once you include that data and predict, then and retrain the model maybe once every, I don't know, I think he said 15 days he's doing it. Then, and I also wanted to ask him whether he does it for each of the fold models, or does he do it only for a single model and include it in the ensemble, or how he retrains and uses the retrain model? Because there are various ways you can do that too, right? Not the retraining, but how you factor in. Do you just predict using that model now, or do you continue to, because any of these notebooks uses, if he's doing it on a 5-fold, he uses 6, right? And if he's doing on a 10-fold, then he uses 11, because basically he uses one additional model which is trained on the entire data after finding the best split depth. And my question was going to be, I think the simplest thing to do is probably to train one model, which you would then throw into the ensemble. Or retrain one model with all the new data every 15 days and throw it into the ensemble and predict.
Yeah, given the time constraints also, yeah, I'm not sure how long it takes. So need to see. Yeah. But yeah, that should be a good starting, where you're incorporating the new data as well as, yeah, building something fresh with your new data.
Yeah, not just predicting based on the new data, but also retraining on the data. I think
Right.
he was retraining it too. That's how probably his score has improved to, I think, 336 something or so, 67 or something like that. So I think that also is because he's retraining it after incorporating the new. So the two steps that I have to figure out. But I was also thinking the simpler thing I wanted to do was to also increase the window and see whether that made any difference. 21 to 35 by adding 14 at the end of that 1, 2, 3, 5, 10.
Yeah.
Because it's creating yet another column which is shifted by 14. And then I'll need an increased window. And that would also confirm if I did that and it all works, then that might give additional confirmation that my guess is right.
Yeah. So if you're trying that and you have summer space, then probably you should try adding something between 1 to 10, right? Because that will be like the more recent data than 2 weeks ago. I'm just thinking in terms of recency.
Sorry, repeat.
Instead of going like 14 days behind.
Back.
Yeah. Rather add a number between 1 to 10. I think there's what 1, 2, 3, 5,
Okay.
and something.
Okay.
So somewhere there.
Right. Okay. I see. So you're saying put a more of a recency bias
Yeah,
than
exactly.
a past.
If that helps. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting.
How does the
Emily, any submissions that you were able to make?
Sorry.
I'm sorry, was that to me?
Yeah.
Oh,
Any last submissions?
no, I'm afraid not. I haven't really made much progress. But, yeah, would have liked to, but haven't gotten a chance.
Sorry, you're saying something, Mike?
Yeah, I was talking about the ensembles here. If you scroll up just a bit. Yeah, here.
This one?
Yeah, this section of the code. So there's
Yeah.
a loop here, and this is a booster. So what does this does, if you guys have any idea?
Actually, see, in this case, he uses, if I'm not mistaken, beyond the folds, he uses multiple models.
Okay.
So, for example, if you see the imports, right, he is using Optiver train preprocess. No. GBM models, and in this case, he just has these 10 models. In the notebook that I was looking at, not this one, but a different one, then it uses multiple models, multiple groups of models. So by that, what I mean is each model has six, one model has 6 folds, another model has 6 folds, another one is, so this, well, in this case, he does one more thing, is the power mean. So what that is he's saying that the predicted by some folds are very atypical and high. And so he tries to fix that by using a power mean function, which is, a cubic, or you can specify the order and put it through here to kind of minimize that atypical contribution from some folds. But if you ignore that, because, that's the power mean part that he refers to here. But if you ignore that, then it's just a question of ensembling. And to your question about the LGB dot booster, there is just a way of defining an LGB model. processing. Let's look at it defines the model and you can call it data processing. So this is just loading the models. That's all it is. And then, the file is loaded from whatever we saw in the input. So it'll be fold underscore 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way to 10. And then, CV split, and then alias prep, I guess, is whatever. Let's see what this. Yeah, because he's using underscore robust, so it'll be like he just strings together whatever he is putting the models as, because the model directories is LGBM, and then path is this, and then manifold underscore robust is what you will see in the input. Yeah, fold underscore 0, and then you can see that it's manifold. Oops, a second. Manifold underscore robust dot model. So that's what this does. So the booster, I think, is just the way that you call the model. Nothing unique.
Rekil has posted something in the chat regarding this.
Yeah, I just found that on Stack Overflow. And I never knew there was something called booster data set, something. Good to know. There's something called a sequence, which may be interesting to look into, since that trains on sequence of data. And I'm wondering, like, as the new data comes in, if something like that will be useful. So if you read the summary below there, the first one, it kind of talks about.
It's an object which is what has the predict method. That's what it looks like. Yeah, so this seems to say that B is the booster. That's the part which does the boosting, right? Which is it continuously fixes the error, the prior projection. So you're saying potentially using sequence?
I don't know. Need to look into what sequence. I never knew there was something like that. Just curious to see.
Oh, yeah, I think without incorporating new data, you're kind of stuck at 5.3-ish. Although I think now, is people have gone all the way to 3.1. 3.0, wow. That's to us. Just 0 I saw. Most of it is 5.3.1, 3.2. There's only one guy in 3.1. 3.2, and then, obviously a lot of us are stuck in.
Can I ask a quick question? And I apologize, I wasn't following this competition, but I have a question related to retraining. So 2 questions. One is, are there missing data, like what you get daily? And the second question is, I've seen some of the features people create. Is there consensus? Is it important to keep daily data, or you can basically start, as you're falling back, you can start doing averages, and that gives enough information? So it's important to know how profile of the stock look, or you can kind of see what the average was like going back.
I'll answer the second question first. I think there is missing data. For example, if you look at some of the EDA files, you'll see that especially in the early days of the competition, not all 200 stocks have the 55. So the way it works, as Nikhil was mentioning earlier too, is it gives 55 seconds or 55 data points every day for 200 stocks. But the way it works is that on some days, certain stocks are missing, especially in the early part of the data set. By early, I mean because you have 6 months. I'm assuming 6 months. It may be 5 or whatever. Assume 6 months. So in the early part of the 6-month data, not all of the stocks have data available for every day. Some days, some stocks are missing. But what they do confirm, and they say that this is guaranteed, is, and by the way, that missing data will also be true in the future. By that, I mean that on any given day in the future, as we move forward, some stocks may be missing. But what is guaranteed is if a stock appears on a day, then all 55 of its data points will be available for that day. So that is something that they say somewhere in the competition detail. So to answer your question, yes, there is missing data on some stocks on some dates, but if a stock appears on a particular day, then its entire 55 data points for that day are guaranteed to be available.
Okay.
That's one. The second thing you said is the average. That I'm not sure, because most of the highly scoring notebooks so far, and I'm assuming this is the case for anything that's not revealed, and that the best score so far, as Mike pointed out, is about 338, 339 in that kind of time frame, in that kind of scoring range. And for most of those, they generate a vast variety of features, but most of them are, when you say averages, what is?
I mean like a exponential smoothing going back, right? So you can take all the data and assume it really matters, like how stock behaved, like was its wallet, like to predict how it could behave, or you can go back and just like see what it was doing on average before.
Yes, I think most of them include if you look at even this particular notebook that we were staring at, then which is so far the more highest scoring public notebook, most of it generates features based on individual available data. By that I mean so for example, for each column of ask price, bid price, ask price, bid price, and then group it by stock. So it doesn't generate averages of stocks and use that. It just does it per stock. So I haven't seen, because again, remember that what I said earlier is your goal is to predict a target price, but it's a target closing price for all 200 shares, but it's compared to a weighted average of all of those. Well, I shouldn't say all of those because it's not just a weighted average of these 200, or I'm unsure of that. It's compared to a weighted average. That's what you eventually predict, a target number that includes the weighted average of stocks.
Mm-hmm. So basically all there's
values.
So there is no smoothing really using data from the past.
Well, I mean, it depends on what you mean by smoothing. The features are not because there is smoothing going on when you generate individual columns which are which are windows slid around, right? Or which you are using. But what I mean is, the specific word, nothing in the features, individual features, is an average across stocks that I've seen.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's all per stock and windows.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean average over different stocks. I meant, looking, you can use exact data like last, or you can average. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Look at what I'm showing right now. If you're, am I sharing or am I not?
No,
you're not showing.
Okay, let me share then.
You're talking of using like last 10 days data as such as provided, but last 20 days of data that gets exponentially weighted down?
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that work, or does it, or you better off using 20 days exactly?
I haven't, that's a good point, but I haven't tried that, but I just clarifying the question. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
So here it is, right? Like it's utilizing various aggregated functions of the prices and the sizes. But it's not an exponential. Well, I mean, it's a mean and a standard. Kurtosis, I always look it up and always forget. Anybody recall what kurtosis is off the top of their head and can give the rest of us? So, and also skew. So it is calculating the mean, the standard, the skew, and the kurtosis, and applying these functions on the prices.
Okay, so those just additional features, basically.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
So I haven't seen any explicit exponential moving average, but this is the closest to averages being used.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any other thoughts, question, or comment? right? Not, I think we just have until December 20th, if I'm not mistaken. 18 days to go in the competition. Yeah, so 2 more weeks practically. So good luck, everybody. Hopefully, you get whatever you're playing with done and submitted for them.
I had a query regarding the Conrad's notebook. So you guys must have watched the videos of it. He had a notebook. It was shared previously. So
Yes.
I had a query with respect to that. The thing that we discussed, the combinatorial purged cross validation method. So was it helpful in understanding that, and in the implementation was useful there?
Yes. I
Okay.
mean, I kind of went over it, I think, in one of the prior discussion where the notebook was discussed in detail. And as to whether it helps, the thing I would comment or observe or is I haven't checked out the splits that this guy does, but the 5-fold CV guy does not do the proper implementation of combinatorial purge cross-validation. So remember, because what he fails to do is he fails to keep the test and training set from overlapping. He overlaps them. And that's a no-no. And the combinatorial, the purge cross-validation, the group purge cross-validation, in our case, as I explained when we discussed this in detail, the purge cross-validation is just a matter of purging and embargoing, which is, getting rid of certain dates whereby there could be overlap. The combinatorial comes into play if you're using, and that's why I asked you whether this is just 10 splits and using just one validation split, because then there is no combinatorial. It's just 10 choose 1, which is 10. But if you use 10 choose 5, then, 5 choose 2, then you would have 10 splits. So that's 10 folds too. So I don't know whether he's using 5 choose 2 or whether he's splitting it 10 way and just using 1 fold. And I have a notebook, and I might point to it in Slack, but I have to be careful because I don't think I can share unless I make it public. I can make it public too. It's not a big deal. But in my case, what I implemented is 5. It's still 5-fold, but I use 2 folds to validate. So I pick at random 2 folds, and the other 3 folds are used for training. And I purge and I embargo in order to ensure there is no overlap in any of the folds being used for training and the folds that are used for validation. And as I went through previously, that didn't, and as Steve also mentioned, they're not going to improve your score. They're just going to give you better CV. Right? So using that in my model didn't give me better score. My score, when I ran it on the test set, was slightly worse, but it's a better, more robust validation scheme. The validation scheme that at least the original 5-fold CV guy used was incorrect because there is overlap between training and validation set. I don't know what this guy has done. I have to check. And okay. So I have to look at the training notebook, I guess, too.
Yeah, this is the 5-fold one that we had seen previously.
Yeah, and this one does not do the old validation correctly. That is overlap between train and valid. And that's wrong, although he gets a better score. So that's the thing, right? You can get lucky.
Mhm.
So here, when he does this particular part, problem is this part. When he does that, this particular part, that causes overlap. Between train and validation set. Okay, any other questions? Comments? If not, good luck everybody. Hopefully we'll all make a little bit more progress by next week. Thanks for joining,
Okay.
everyone. See you all next week.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, bye.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Take care.